You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi guys, good to be back with you again. You're listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis, and I am Mighty Blue, bringing you the stories of hikers mainly on the Appalachian Trail, though I'm never worried about going to other trails as long as we get a good conversation to share with you. Today we're presenting a new format for the next few months. As many of you know, I'm off to the UK and Ireland in March, then I'm going to be hiking in Scotland after that. In all, I'll be away 5 weeks, and to be honest, I did consider having a bit of a sabbatical from the show while I was away. But then I came up with this. My latest book reading has come to an end. Most of my class of 2022 are planning to get out on the trail. Indeed, some of them are already out there. So I'm going to front load episodes for when I'm away by having a normal main interview, no book reading. Then in the last week before I head overseas, I'll be recording a whole bunch of latest news from the class of 2022, letting you all know when they're recorded and adding one of those latest news updates from our class in each of those episodes that come out when I'm away. In that way, we'll do a big catch up on my return. Then I'll start reading a new book. I'm not sure if that's clear or not, because it took me a long time to write it. But, well, we're all going to work it out together, won't we? So this week's guest is Annmarie Noonan. Annmarie wrote to me wanting to share a story about through hiking the Appalachian Trail over 4 years. I loved the email and invited Annmarie on the show. She'll be on in a moment. After Annmarie, our latest and second from last member of the class of 2022, Dave Burge, will be telling us his story, and spoiler alert, Dave is already on the trail and heading north at pace. So I think you got the drift. Interview, class of 2022, updates, if any, no reading, then it's the theme music. So let's hear from Annmarie Noonan, or Vista Seeker. And as many of you know, I've been chatting with a few hikers in recent months who've through-hiked the Appalachian Trail in sections. My guest today, Annmarie Noonan, did just that over 4 years. Welcome to the podcast, Annmarie.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's good to have you on the show. And you actually, and the reason why I really wanted to speak to you was you sent me a very detailed story about your hike. So let's start at the beginning. Why did you want to do this in the first place?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And there's a reason why this happened. And you have to go back. I'm 36 years old now, but you have to go back to right when I graduated from college. And that summer after I graduated, a couple of friends and I decided to do a 6-week backpacking trip through Western Europe. And
nice.
Yeah, and over the course of those 6 weeks, though, with the people that I met from different countries, I started to notice this kind of trend or pattern. And it was like so many times when somebody would find out I was from America, there was like this common response. And they would say, "Oh, you're from America. You're so lucky. You live in the most beautiful country." And they would start naming these places that they had been to. The Rocky Mountains and Glacier National Park, the Redwood Forest. Like, you have it all there. And I started thinking, like, wow, these people have seen more of my own country than I have. So,
wow, now there's a thought, isn't it?
Yeah. So the very next summer, and that was after my first year of teaching, I decided, you know what, I'm going to go see the country. So I packed up my Toyota Camry and I went on a cross-country road trip for 2 months.
Wow.
Nothing but one of those atlas books that you use with like a state on each page to get you through.
For the accent listening, GPS didn't always exist.
There was no GPS that I had, at least. But I just essentially made this huge loop, 2 months, put 9,000 miles on the car, stopped at 15 different national parks and forests, visited 9 cities. And it was an incredible trip. But the thing of it was, and I remember this as clear as day, I'm driving home and I enter back and I cross into the state of Virginia, and it's been 2 months. And I have one more mountain to get over before hitting I-81 back into the Shenandoah Valley. And as I'm going over this mountain, I remember like it was sunny, it was a blue sky, and I'm looking out on this vista of these mountains, and I had this realization, like, you've just spent 2 months traveling the country and seeing all these places, and the most beautiful place of it all is right in your own backyard. And so that was like the moment I knew I was going to explore the Appalachian Mountains.
So you knew about the Appalachian Trail anyway. Were you a hiker at the time?
So, I mean, casually, I guess. I didn't hike very often, but every once in a while, you know, if friends were going or if like the school was taking a trip, and I love to hike, I'll go out, but I wasn't never a serious hiker. And when I knew I wanted to go explore, I did purchase Bill Bryson's book. And so I read that, and that was what kind of...
People, and by the way, people either love it or they hate it.
Yeah,
and
I loved
it. Same here. People are not one way or the other about it, are they? They either loathe it or they love it. And I loved it as well. I've listened to it 4 times on the audio, and I get something new out of it every time. But to explore these mountains, you've got a full-time job, because you mentioned being a teacher earlier on. So getting this done in 4 years, particularly just in 4 years, must have taken quite a bit of your vacation time. I know teachers get quite a bit. So tell us about that, how that worked out.
Yeah, so I'm actually a principal now, so I no longer have the summers off, unfortunately.
Oh my gosh. Is that what happens when you become principal?
Yep.
That's like a demotion as far as I'm concerned.
But when I started, though, the very first section I did, I was still a teacher, and that was the last full summer that I had. And so that whole story came about actually when we decided, it was a group of teachers, we were at a winery sitting around a campfire, and I guess we started talking about hiking, but I just remember just throwing it out there and said, you know what, we should hike the Appalachian Trail this summer. And so kind of that grew into a reality. And so that summer I got in a good chunk, 47 days. And went from Damascus to Harper's Ferry. And like, I tell this story because I remember it too. So I finished the trail in Harper's Ferry, and my dad came, he lives in Philadelphia, and he came to meet me in Harper's Ferry to celebrate. So the next day we're walking around Harper's Ferry, and we go to the ATC, and we're looking at all the stuff. And, you know, there's that binder full of Polaroid pictures of through hikers.
I'm in there twice.
There you go. So I'm looking through that at these pictures, and the woman working there, you know, she's talking to us, and she said, well, you hiked the whole state of Virginia, you know, over 500 miles. You've got so much of it done. If you're going to hike the rest, you know, I can take your picture today. We can put it. And I remember laughing and thinking, no way. Like, I am good. You know, I've done.
Oh, hang on then. So I didn't realize this. So perhaps I misread it. Let me think about this then. I've got most of the email in front of me. So when you finished that first section, that was, you say, your longest section, or quite a long section. So that was it, as far as you're concerned. It was kind of one and done. You weren't expecting some stage to carry on.
At the time, that's what I thought. I said, I'm good now. You know, I did it. I explored it. It was a big trip. You know, it was awesome. And I didn't have any intention of hiking anymore. And then then the drug kicked in. That was it. It's like the itch. It's like the AT itch that you get. And I think it was 2 months later. And I remember sitting on the couch and I was like, I got to go back out there. And even then, it wasn't to finish it. It was like, but I got to go do like another little section. So I wanted to go to New.
And what were you getting out of it then? What was it about it that when you finished after 47 days at Harper's and you think, this is great, I've done this, what was it that made you suddenly change your mind? Was it because you couldn't stop thinking about it? Because that's what happens to most people.
I think it was. I think part of it was I had such a great time on the trip. I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I wanted to see more of it. You know, I wanted to see different states and different parts of it. And so I planned to go out to New England to do part of the Whites that summer. And I was out there for a few days, and I actually had to get off the trail because I had a phone interview to be an assistant principal at the school that I was currently teaching at. So I got off at in North Woodstock, New Hampshire, in a little Days Inn cottage, had a phone interview for a job, and I ended up getting called in for a second interview in person. So I had to cut the trip a little bit short. And And even then, though, I was like, that was great. That was a great trip. But it wasn't until the next itch that I had, and I actually, I was married at the time I started the trail, but I was going through a separation, and I ended up moving out. The very first break that we had from school, that's when I knew, because at that point it was like I was being called. Like that's where I wanted to go. That's where I wanted to be. And I was like, you know what? I'm going back to the trail. And you know what else? I'm going to do the whole thing.
Oh, right. That was the time, was it? So after your second or third go. So what was it like after that then? Because I suppose at the end of every term, everyone goes home, goes on holiday. Do you immediately head out to the trail now? Or were you in these last 4 years?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so from then on, every single break I had from school, every winter break. So, I mean, spent all those Christmases on the trail. Easter was always spent on the trail. Every break that I had, I would go out and I would see what I could accomplish. Even when I was close to home, so there's a good, I call it my third section, but it was actually a combination of like 8 different hikes probably. But through Pennsylvania, it was still close enough. So on a weekend, on like a Saturday, I could drive 2 hours, get to where I left off, do an 25-mile trail run, whatever, hitch back to my car, and then go home by the time the day was over. So, I mean, I was just doing every little piece I could anytime I could.
So how were you keeping the map? Did you have a map, or did you have a good record in the book? How were you recording it all?
Well, I had my books, but I also had a long map from the ATC,
of course, and it's everyone's got one
taped up right next to my fireplace, and anytime I did a little bit, I'd take my red Sharpie, it was always a red Sharpie, and I'd color in the little bit that I did.
Wow, that's amazing. And one of the things you say that you made the point that you hike the trail in your way, and you've already referred to a bit of trail running. I mean, you're quite a slight figure, aren't you? You're not a big woman. So people can't see you. Obviously, I'm not recording the video, but I can see you. You're quite a small woman. So do you run because you've always been a runner, or do you find it easier running on the trail?
I've always been a runner. I run every day. And I had been running every day for years before that. So running is just something I love to do. I mean, I love hiking, but I also love running. And so, yeah, I know at first that when I did the first section, it was like, oh, you have to have the whole pack, and you can't slack pack, and you can't cut corners, and by the time when I decided that the reality was I wanted to do this, and I wanted to do it as quickly as I could, because I also had other goals that I wanted to get to as well. So, there were times where it made more sense for me to go and to do a long run or a long hike and get rides back. And at that point, I said, I'll do it anyway. And I just stopped caring about how I did it. So there were times where, I did sections and I was backpacking and, did it all. And then there were times where I would do these trail runs. And to me, I didn't like one way more than the other. They were different and they were special. Yeah.
Did you find because this is pretty good advice for people if they go into the mountains to take enough so they can stay overnight if they need to. So you said here, I mean, this thing, you did a 37-mile trail run one day. Oh my gosh. It says is it either to or from Delaware Water Gap. So you did 37 miles in one day. Did you have no pack then? It was just to run?
I just had my little running pack that day. And I had a ride coming that was going to meet me. So, I knew.
You're pretty confident.
Yeah, I had a destination.
And you know what? On the AT, you can always get off it. But, it's always a worry if you go out there, and because it's a kind of remote place. So while you were doing this in these different ways, and another time you said you did in 9 straight days, about 30 miles a day, which is crazy, by the way, you hiked from Hot Springs to Springer Mountain. Tell us about that, because 30 miles in one day is enough, but to do it in 9 straight days is almost ridiculous.
So here's the story with that. It was a spring break. That's when I did it. And I like I always did, okay, break, I got to start seeing where I'm going to go, and so I said, okay, I have 9 days. So I went over to that little map by my fireplace. I sat down and I looked at where do I want to go. And I looked So I looked at hot springs, and then I said, okay, let me say 20, because 20 miles a day was average. So I said, let me do the mileage and see. So I looked at where it would have put me if I did 20 miles a day, and I'm like, so close. And I was like, there is no way I'm going to do all of this and have to get picked up from Georgia and figure all this out and then have to go all the way back down. So I do my little calculations and I divide up 9 days if I do the whole thing, and it's like, like 29.644 miles a day. And I had this moment where I said, okay, it's like when you set a goal for yourself, you want it to be very challenging, but you do not want it to be without of the realm of possibility. And I said,
it already was for me.
Yeah. Well, I said, is this achievable for me? Like, is this something that I can possibly do? And I thought about it, and I said, the answer to this question is yes. And that was it. I'm going to go and I'm going to do it. And there were times I questioned if I was going to be able to do it for sure, but I did it.
So how did you do it? Because you've got a limit. So you not had to finish, but you were expecting to finish. You wanted to finish. And that was, by the way, to get to Springer and then not down the approach trail as well, was it?
No, I did not go down the approach trail.
Okay, you went down, went back down once you got to Springer. Right. So what was your attitude in those 10 days? Because some days are tougher than others. Some days you don't feel like doing 30. So if you did 25 one day, you would have to obviously up it the next day and so on. Is that how you managed it, or did you pretty much stay consistently on 30?
There was only one day, and that was the very first day. The first day I intended to go like a little bit farther than I ended up going. And so I think I had to make up, maybe it was like 3 miles or something. I think I went like 27 miles, and I was like, I said, I'm never making that mistake again. Like from now on, because then it was like when you're doing 30 miles a day, the thought of having to do 31 at that moment, like, is excruciating. So it's like, sure, I'm just going to stick to it. And
that's exactly what I was thinking, actually. That's precisely it, because it's such a relatively short time to make up those miles. If you had a 0 day, you would have been in all sorts of trouble, wouldn't you, for example? Yeah. So it would have been a bit of a nightmare. So you said you did it your way. Were you enjoying the hiking? Were you enjoying the trail? Because going as fast as that, you do miss a lot of things and a lot of people. You can't just sit on a rock and just look out, can you?
No. And I think that is why I always use that and say that I did it my way, because to me, the trail is what you get out of it, not what anybody else wants you to get out of it or what somebody else gets out of it, but it's what you get out of it and how you enjoy doing it. And for me, part of what I got so much out of it was pushing myself to the absolute brink that I could physically and mentally. And that was a part that was really important for me. So I enjoyed it because I was getting fulfilled in that way. And I did not stop. Ironically, my trail name is Vista Seeker, because my favorite part is I do love the vistas. Whenever I got to a part and I could see, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. But I would not stay there for very long. I did not really taking a lot of breaks, or I just wanted to go, and I wanted to go as far as I could. And I had fun doing it that way.
It's funny. You talk about one of your favorite sections, from Damascus to Hot Springs. Tell us about that and why it was so special for you.
Yes, that was one of my favorite because it was so different. And that was thinking logistically and what I was able to work with and who I was able to work with. The way I realized I was going to have to do that is I'm going to go out there. I have 10 days, but I didn't have any rides there or back. So I thought, okay, well then I can only do this 2 ways. I can do like 10 miles in and then go back to my car 10 miles and then, drive around and try. And I thought, oh my gosh, I couldn't bring myself to do that much backtracking and so I said, okay, or I could just do about 20 miles a day, see what road I get off on, and find some way to hitchhike back to my car and then drive.
Part of your hike, I was interested. So part of your hike was more than a lot of other people's hike, because it was literally a logistical exercise to get back after a certain amount of time on a certain road. It's pretty brave to do that, I would say, wouldn't you?
Oh, yes. I had so many family and friends get so angry with me about that because they
Really?
were, oh, yeah, not truly angry, but just, what are you doing? Like, you're crazy. That is so unsafe. And just worried about me, understandably. Like, and I get it. But I realized I was thinking in all the rides that I ever hitched over the course, which was a ton. There was only one time it was in Pennsylvania, and I was on a side of a highway and someone did stop, and I just had intuition, and I looked in the car and I said, nope, no, thank you. I'm good. Thanks. And I just
Really?
knew that wasn't a car to get into. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What did you see?
I just remember seeing just, it was just the interaction and the way that the person stopped and talked to me. And then there's just a ton of stuff in the car. And it's just a feeling. It was just a feeling. And I said, you know what? Thank you so much, but I'm good. And like a few minutes later, a dad with a couple of kids stopped, and I got right in there and everything was fine. And so I get it. Like I totally get why that's a dangerous thing and people are worried about it. But that trip, which was one of my favorites, the thing of it was in 10 days, I hitchhiked 18 different rides. And
does your family know that? Or is this the first time you told them?
Yeah, they know. But like the reason why I love that experience so much is, and I am an introvert, like true to the heart. I'm very socially awkward. I am not good with, I get nervous about like small talk with people I don't know. So like I was really having to put myself out there in a place where I was not comfortable, but I needed to do it because I needed to accomplish this. I needed to get back into my car. And what that made me realize, that experience, was the people during that 10 days were some of the kindest, most compassionate human beings I ever met. Like I had people go 40 minutes out of their way once they found out like there's this little person, it is cold outside, she is hiking. I mean, New Year's Eve, there was a couple, Jack and Betsy, and they were like, no, we're taking you all the way to where your car is. 40 minutes out of their way. I got to give a shout out to Randall. There was this man, Randall. I got off at Hughes Gap somewhere. Nobody was picking me up. There were no cars around. I finally got a ride a few miles, and then I'm looking for another ride. And this man named Randall picks me up. And he drives me. He's like, well, I can drive you to this intersection a few miles down the road. I'm like, great. Thank you so much. And he's like, well, where are you, what are you doing? Where are you going? I tell him I got to get to my car. I think it was like Indian Grave Gap somewhere, and I'm like, I really appreciate you taking me. And he drops me off at the intersection and we part ways. He goes the other way. And I get picked up by someone named Bill in the cabin of a semi truck. He takes me a little bit and he has to go off home. So he drops me off. I get picked up by Rocky. He takes me a little bit. He's like, I got to turn off to go home. He drops me off. Well, he drops me off in this middle of nowhere, which looks like the road's just going to end up leading up to that mountain. And I start walking and someone passes me. And then this truck pulls up and stops. And I look in the window and it's Randall. And he's like, I just couldn't leave you. I had to come back. He's like, I have a 22-year-old daughter and I just kept thinking of you out there in that cold. And he picked me up and he drove me 10 miles probably all the way up that mountain to my car. I mean,
bless him. Oh my gosh. It's amazing to me that you say you're introverted and you don't come across it at all. You're very articulate about, and I think it's the passion coming through. There's a passion about you that is maybe reserved for the Appalachian Trail, and it's the people within the Appalachian Trail in the communities that seem to fuel that passion. Because you don't seem in the least bit introverted to me. So, what did the trail do to you then that allowed you to get into 18 different rides in 10 days and put yourself out there like that?
Yeah, I think part of it was sheer determination to do something. And then over time, like the realization that I can also get this different kind of experience that I normally wouldn't get because I wouldn't put myself in those situations. If I had the choice to stand in a corner and read a book or go make small talk, I'd probably stand in a corner and read a book. But since I had to put myself in these situations, I ended up getting something so good out of it that I probably never would have normally, received. And I hold on to that. And that means something to me.
So now, what would it be? So what would you be going for this time? Would it be standing in the corner reading a book? Now you've done the Appalachian Trail, or would it be actually indulging in small talk, especially if it's about hiking?
Oh, if it's about hiking, I'm all in. I mean, if we're talking about the trail, yeah, I'm all in about that. But no, I mean, I'm still introverted, and I love that part about myself. But it's doing different experiences where there has to be a reason, right? There has to be something to push me, or a reason, and then I get something. Then I get something really, I really get something out of it.
Sure. So, do your colleagues know about this? Let's call it a session, because it's a reasonable word to put it. What do your fellow teachers think about you doing something like this? Is this something that appeals to them, or you've got other people to go out there as well?
Oh, yeah. I mean, all of my colleagues and a lot of the teachers, and in fact, that very first section, I hiked with one of my colleagues. We didn't hike together all the time, but we both did start it in Damascus, finish at Harper's Ferry.
Sure.
And so that was a great experience. And a couple other teachers hiked different parts of it. But, a lot of them are inspired and love talking to me about it. In fact, there is one of my teachers here at school who her son just went out and hiked a little small section of the Appalachian Trail. And she was so excited for him and also nervous. And she knew that I, had hiked. And so we arranged for us all to have lunch together just so he could ask me questions. And that's cool. What I love. I love those conversations. But I've received a lot of support from family, friends, teachers, colleagues, for sure.
And what about the kids? I mean, I still think, I know I meant, and I always sound patronizing when I say kids, and I talk about 20, 25-year-olds, which is terrible for me to say that. But I met a lot of youngsters on the trail, both times I went. And, do you tell your children about this at all? I suppose, do you not teach as a principal anymore? I'm not even sure whether they do, whether principals teach.
So when I still was a teacher and I had students, and the one group knew I was going to be going out to do a section, and actually, the summer after I got back from the first section, I've done things where I brought my pack to school with all my gear and stuff, and did little talks with the kids. But nice. I also kept in that little section in New England that I did for like 10 days. I did a little blog, and I had a following of students on my webpage and my YouTube, and so I did do a little blog for them to show them little parts of it. And now the biggest conversation piece that I have, because it's been 2-3 years since this, sure. I do have a tattoo on my forearm, an AT tattoo. I only have one tattoo. Of course, it had to be related to the AT, and I got it like probably halfway through. And it's, a picture of mountains and the AT, and it has a little sun and footprints. And I got it facing me, because my idea was like, so when I'm hiking with my trekking poles, I'm going to look down on that, and it's going to be motivation, to keep going. But sometimes when the kids see it, they'll ask me, they're like, oh, do you have a tattoo? And they'll say, well, what is it? And that's always, I always tell them a little bit about the trail. And I've gone into went into one teacher's class when she asked me to go in and to talk about a little part of it with whatever they were studying. So for sure.
That's great. I think it's wonderful for them to have that, not so much to aspire to, but to see what can be done by the commitment to do it. And I mentioned at the beginning that you wrote to me about your hike, and that was great, and I enjoyed that part of it. But it was the journal entry that you added that really struck me, and it was about, and what you actually said was, the journey hiking the AT piece by piece, mile by mile, has helped define me. In what way has it actually defined you? What are you defined as now?
Well, I think what I meant by that is, for me, it defined what I was capable of. And when I pushed myself to those limits, being able to do that and to get through it and to come through to the other side defined this I think this confidence in me, really, which is what it is, because, I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. That part I decided when I was 11, and I was always confident as a teacher, but I never knew I was going to end up as a leader, as an administrator, as a principal. And Going into that, there have been times where I've had imposter syndrome, and thinking, am I good enough for this? Am I making the right decisions? Am I doing the best I can? And being able to go off on the trail and have that experience did help define for me that confidence that you can do this. Like, you got it. Like, you can go back. I can disconnect from everything going on, have this incredible experience, allow it to fuel me, to give me the confidence, and then to come back and say, okay, you got this.
So what impact do you think, you don't have to think it because you did it, but what impact do you think it would have been had you not been able to finish it? For some reason, you just said, this is just too darn much for me. Do you think that would have stuck with you, or you just said, okay, fair enough, let's move on to the next thing?
Well, first of
Your
all,
face, because by the way, yeah. I should have had a picture of her face then. It was like
first of all, there's no way that ever could have happened. I was going to finish it. I was going to finish
Clearly.
it. Yeah. So let's just leave that at that. But no, I think that would have stuck with me. I think I would have never felt like, and I don't know, I can't say for sure. It didn't happen that way. But I think part of me would have always said, and maybe it would have been okay to leave it incomplete at the time, but I think I would have come back at some point and finished it.
That was funny. That actually. Another thing in your post, which I thought was hilarious, was you said that you experienced the pure bliss of dancing above tree line in the whites, like no one's watching. And then you said, in fact, no one was watching. So did you literally have a little dance at the top there?
I had a dance party. I mean, I can remember really doing this 2 times. One was in the Redwood Forest, and then one was that moment. And I don't remember what song was on the iPod, but I just remember, and it wasn't even a part where like that's where I was stopping for the night or anything, but I was all alone, and this is gorgeous view, and amazing. I'm just like threw down. And by the way, I have no dance moves, I have no rhythm, and I cannot dance. So, but man, I just let loose, and I was for a good solid probably 10-15 minutes I was just dancing.
Oh, that is so cool. I can just imagine as well. And you actually wrote that after summiting Katahdin. Did you fill in all the way to Katahdin so you could finish at Katahdin, or did you finish somewhere else?
I filled it all the way so that I could finish at Katahdin.
Right. So that was your last section. So what was that like then? Because for a lot of section hikers, Katahdin isn't their last section at all. So you had that same feeling a lot of us, people who through hiked in one go, have, just because as you were going up towards the sign. Tell us about your Katahdin day then. It must have been pretty darn awesome.
There was a big storm. So it was awesome.
Matter.
It was awesome in that sense. But yeah, this part's a little bit different for me. I don't know. So I don't feel, I know I've listened to people and, there's that moment and there's that sign. And for some reason, like, I didn't necessarily have that. It wasn't like it was anything, bad or anything. It was a great moment, but it was like that same thing. Okay. There's a job to get done, and I go up and it's literally, you can't see anything. It's thundering. Sure. I mean, it was lightning and thunder and rain coming in, and I couldn't, I got my glasses, I couldn't see anything. And I wouldn't have wanted it any other way though. 'Cause like, what a perfect way. You go through all of this, and then it's like, you're here, and it's just, that's what you get when you're on the trail, and,
so, that wasn't your last section though, was it? The literally just climb Katahdin, or did you do the 100-mile wilderness then Katahdin?
I started in Andover. So it was
quite a long hike.
Yeah, it was 12 days, and I started in Andover and then ended in Katahdin. And, I went up and got my picture and, went down and got completely poured on and thought, it was a perfect ending to it. But for me, I think too, also, I had spent 4 years on this, and I knew my next thing was, I wanted to work toward a doctoral degree, but I didn't want to start that until I had finished the trail. So it was like, this is awesome. Okay, you did it. And okay, now what's next? Let's start looking forward to the next thing.
And I think that's an important thing. I think we've said that in the show before, because I know that both times I finished that the aftermath was kind of a little bit deflating, because you've had all that work and effort and so on. Like, you think, what's it going to happen? And funnily enough, I think it was actually the reaction of my listeners that kept me from dipping into a bit of a depression. In your case, you probably had to go straight back to school, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. And I think I went straight back to school, straight back to work. And then, like I said, I applied for a doctoral program. And that is so time consuming. I do think that's important because, there was that fear, and that's like that one quote I share with you. Who am I if I don't have who I am when I'm on the trail? There is that fear of like when this is done, what's that going to feel like?
Yeah.
And that's a real thing. I mean, I think it's probably especially a real thing for thru hikers when you spend that much time day after day after day after day, and then, there you are.
Yeah, but Annmarie, this is my drug. The podcast, talking to people about it. A lot of hikers out there don't get the chance to talk to other people about it. I hear people's stories all the time. My listeners often say to me, I'm enthusiastic about the hikers I speak to because they're talking about hiking. That's why. So now that you've done it, and I think the answer is probably going to be yes, but are you satisfied? Or are you going to do another long distance hike? Are you going to do one long go from beginning to end? What are your plans to hike, or are there no plans at all?
Well, there are no concrete plans right now. Although, no, I mean, this is not the end of me hiking. When I was on the trail, like I just felt like I was in my element. Like there's no other way to describe it. It just felt that's where I should be. It felt right. So when I retire someday, I know I am doing a thru hike. I mean, I want to do a thru hike. So that will be down the line. But I would love to do, my fiance right now, she actually started listening to your podcast, and she's the one that said you got to listen to this podcast. So she's been listening to all your episodes. I know she's getting excited. We talked about when we have a child or children that we want to get them out there hiking on the AT and stuff like that.
Cool.
So
well, when you do, give me a shout. If I'm still doing podcasts, then I'd love to have you all on the show. It'd be pretty cool.
For sure.
Well, thanks for coming on, and really thanks for sharing your story. You're very enthusiastic about it, and I love that in people who've spent so much time to get what they wanted and get their dream, and good luck on the doctorate.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. It was great talking with you.
Cheers then.
All right. Bye.
I tell you, her passion certainly came through, didn't it? That's kind of why I mentioned how much I get out of doing this show myself. Getting the chance to talk to people who understand your story is so satisfying. There's something about sharing this experience, and I totally understood why she wants to share her stories with others. I'm guessing many of us who've done this or are out there start quite a few of our conversations with, when I was hiking, we just can't help it. We learn so much that relates to everyday life. Thanks this week to our donors, the people who keep the show going. This week we had a bunch of recurring donations from Alan Troy, Jessica Diaz, Michelle Brown, Melanie Swisher, Hugh Eckrath and Kevin Eastman, while John Park, Renelle Baker and Jonathan Harris gave donations as well. Thanks to all of you for your support. I am truly grateful. Now, this bloke was meant to be one of my earliest class of 2022 members, but, well, I dropped the ball a bit, to be honest. I only called up with him once he'd already started his hike. Let's hear from Dave Burge. Well, we're on with somebody I intended to speak to just before the new year. This is Dave Burge. Hey, Dave, how are you?
I'm great, Steve. How are you?
Well, I'm good, thanks. And I don't know what happened. We kind of, maybe I dropped the ball somewhere down the line and we didn't speak, but you sent me an email telling me that you were going to be hitting the trail on the 31st of December. So yours is a 2021 hike. And you did hit the trail on 31st December, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
So tell us, firstly, why are you out there and why on earth were you out there on the 31st of December?
Well, Steve, it's one of those things where I had a window. I thought I could do the hike, and I'm a farmer. Mm-hmm. I raise beef cattle in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky, and I basically have to be back by June 1st to make hay to feed my cattle next year.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah. So, I've learned a lot in the last couple of weeks about why that may not happen. We just got clobbered with some snow.
Yes, I know.
And if it snows in April or May, that's gone in a day or two. But in January, it hangs around, and it has really been taking a toll on how fast I can hike.
So, but you say that, but you're quite a way into it, aren't you? I know exactly where you are. You tell the listener. I'm recording this on Thursday, January the 20th. Okay, so you're 21 days into your hike. Tell us where you are.
I'm at the Laughing Heart Hostel in Hot Springs right now.
So how many miles is that you've done so far?
Oh, geez. Caught me off guard. I tell you what, Steve, because of the snowstorm, I ended up skipping the Smokies. I had to sit out. I had to sit out for 4 days.
Oh gosh.
I was really on a roll. The 5 days up to Fontana, I was knocking out 15 miles, and I really felt like I was in a groove. I had things going my way.
Sure.
And I want to, you've talked a lot about people on the trail that care and how compassionate.
Yes.
So at the Georgia state line, I met this guy. His name's Joe, and his trail name is Nog.
Uh-huh.
And he's a very, very experienced older hiker. He's done the PCT sections and this and that. And so I met him, a week or so into my hike. And then I showed up at Fontana, and I get a text message, and he said, "Dave, I am very concerned about you going up to those elevations with the storm that we've got coming."
Sure.
And so we formulated a plan where he was going to drive 4 hours, come pick me up, take me up to Newfound Gap. This is, we're making this plan on a Thursday, a week ago today.
Yeah.
And he was going to take me up there and then I was going to hike north away from the direction the storm was coming. I thought I'd be at Standing Bear before the storm hit.
Yep.
And the long story short is I woke up Friday morning and Newfound Gap was already closed.
It was already closed.
So I couldn't do that. So I shuttled up to Standing Bear, and I stayed there for 4 days.
Jeez.
That's mile 241. And I hiked 15 to Roaring Fork, which was just over
over Max Patch. Yeah.
And let me tell you, Steve, that almost killed me. The drifts, and so the 4.5 mile approach up to the top of Max Patch wouldn't have been too bad, I don't think, except that we had 8 to 10 inches of snow, and then the drifts were at least mid shin up to my knee.
Oh gosh.
And it was just, and the sad thing is, I've heard you say that Max Patch was your favorite. And the sad part was I got up there and it was so cold and so windy that I couldn't stay. I just couldn't do it. I had to get down off the elevation.
But that speaks to what I often say, isn't it? When the views are there and you can have them, take them, because they may not be there another time. And in your case, it wasn't the views; it was just too darn cold to sit around. But that's the way it goes.
Right.
And you're going to hit different parts of the trail at different times to most people, I should think. So, are you having fun out there, Dave?
Steve, there's two things that I've heard you say 100 times. Be careful what you wish for. And I wished for, what I wanted was a challenge and solitude on my hike. And oh my gosh, have I gotten both? In the last 3 days, I've only seen 2 people. And the challenge, like I talked about Max Patch, the challenge was just unbelievable. I think I pretty much gave it everything I had on that day.
Yes.
I didn't leave anything on the table. And I got into the shelter at Roaring Fork after dark.
So what about the solitude then? Is that getting to you, or are you starting to feel lonely as opposed to just alone? Because being alone's okay, but being lonely is a different thing. So how are you feeling?
Well, you know what? Early, I was lonely, which is kind of strange. I mean, 2 or 3 days into the hike, I was kind of lonely.
Sure.
And And now, 3 days only seeing 2 people, talking to myself a lot more. But
so I shouldn't laugh. I should laugh.
But I'm not minding it as much. It's like I'm getting used to it.
Yeah.
I like hiking alone because I feel that I'm pretty strong, but, I don't want to have to, it's that hike your own hike thing.
Yeah.
But I would love to have people to talk to at night in camp. I hiked 2 days with a young man named Mook, and he ended up getting hurt, had to take a couple days off to heal. And I've lost track of him.
The thing is, Dave, if you're expecting or hoping to finish by June because you've got to feed the cattle, which I understand, you probably should have known you were likely to be out there by yourself quite a bit. And really, so you must, to a degree, have been expecting it. Has it actually, and so I'm sure in some ways you knew you were going to spend some time by yourself. Has it been more visceral than you'd imagined it to be? Because it's harsh, isn't it? It can be harsh when the weather's so cold, you're sitting in a shelter and there's no one there. When there's someone there to have a chat, it's great. When you're by yourself in a shelter, I never enjoyed that personally. I liked having a chat with people.
Yes, I agree. I haven't done a lot with the electronics, like download a movie to watch or anything. And
sure.
I did finally start doing that because, I took a picture of myself last night. I sent it to my wife. I said, 6:15, I'm in bed. That's the way it goes. Oh, yeah. And boy, would it be nice to have somebody to talk to, but that's just not the way it is. So yeah, I knew that going in, but,
have you considered quitting yet or not?
Not really. I'll tell you a quick story. So day 2, I'm on Gooch Mountain, and Chili Mac and Dine and Dash were there, and Dine and Dash he's attempting a single year Triple Crown.
Oh my gosh.
And it's funny because he looked right at me and very knowingly said, "So how do you feel?" And I wanted to be honest with him. So I said, I feel great physically and mentally. I'm good. I said, "You're not going to believe this." I said, "I've been prepping for this hike for 18 months.
Yeah.
I have even done I did an out and back 40 miles at Amicalola Falls, January 1st of 2021.
Right.
And I said, I wasn't on the trail 30 seconds. And I said to myself, what the heck are you doing? And he laughed out loud, and he said, me too. He said, I do that. He said, I've done a number of through hikes. And he said, I ask myself that early in the hike at the same time. And then he said, give yourself 10 days.
Interesting.
And now, I wasn't questioning, I have never thought about quitting yet. And I don't really think I will unless the snow gets too bad.
Yeah, I mean, you to be fair, you've bitten off a lot here. I know that when I went last time in 2019, I started a month behind where you are now. In other words, I started in February, I think February the 26th in 2019. And it was cold then, so you got some cold weather for the next month and a half, maybe 2 months. Are you physically prepared for the cold weather, or are you having nights where you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is awful?
No, I'll tell you what, I don't want to brag on my bag, but I'll tell you what, the nights are pleasant for me. And I've been down, I had one below 15. I'm not sure. I was at Hogback Ridge.
That's fun.
in a tent. And I know it was below 15, but I don't know exactly how low. I've got a little thermometer, and it's not really good. But, I was talking to my son, and he said, Dad, what's the worst part? And I said, getting out of bed when it's below 25. That is the worst.
As they say, no shit, Sherlock. So what do you do? I mean, are you cooking at night? Because I also remember it took so long to boil water when it was so cold outside as well. How are you doing for food?
I'm doing good. So I've learned something there. The answer to your question is, on the days that I can, I usually cold soak a lunch.
Right.
And then I've got, like I carry 3 snacks for the day, and I'm not like you. I love my oatmeal. Absolutely. I could eat oatmeal every day of my life.
Don't worry, you will.
Yeah. So oatmeal and coffee with breakfast essentials. That's my breakfast every day. And then dinner, I do the same stuff we all do. Steve, I don't know. I sent myself for the first month, packages.
Yes.
And I really like the food, and I don't necessarily, I don't know if I should say this or not, but I use a woman named Backcountry Foodie.
Yeah.
She's got some great recipes, and it's still ramen, but I love this one called Spicy Cashew Ramen.
Right.
And I love that. And she's got several others.
That's good free advertising. Happy days. Happy days.
Yeah.
So you're eating food. You're eating okay. You're not thinking of quitting. You're sleeping well. You're sleeping well at night. You say it's the most comfortable at night. You sleeping pretty well generally?
Yeah. 12 hours in the sack. I'm not sleeping straight through. That's for sure. But, yeah, I'm comfortable.
Getting up for a pee in the middle of the night when it's 15 degrees sucks, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's not nice.
Well, look, I'm really glad we got the chance to introduce you to the audience, and you're quite a way through. You're doing really well so far. Is the plan to go back at the end and finish the smokies, or how you plan to do it so far?
Yes, that's the plan. I live about, I'm going to say 5.5 hour drive.
Fine.
From the Smokies.
Sure.
So it's not a real problem to drive back there and finish it.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll tell you, Steve, I'm worried about the whites in April. That's what I'm worried about.
Really? Actually, yes, you're right. They do still get snow up there. Are you going to be there by April, though, do you think?
Well, I don't know. If I don't get stopped by snow, I mean, just think about it. If I want to finish up 1st of June, and there's 238 miles in May, and you start backing things up.
Yeah.
That puts me end of April in the whites.
Yes, it does, doesn't it? Oh my gosh. Well, look, this is an unusual hike to be going at this time, and I admire you for it. I think you're crazy, a bit like Chuck. In fact, I think you met Chuck, didn't you? He was also one of our hikers.
I did.
Yeah, I've got to follow up with him soon.
I met him first day.
Right, yeah, I've got to follow up with him soon as well, yeah. So look, you've got my number now. Let me know. Call again in a couple of weeks' time. We'll get you on the show again because you're one of the few who's actually out there right now. So we'll just see how you're making progress. But welcome to the show. So log in and best of luck for the next couple of weeks, okay?
Okay.
How about that? He's in Hot Springs. Man, he must be a man of steel. Actually, Dave met Chuck Hayes, our previous early starter in the class of 2022. So I reached out to Chuck today because I was under the impression he'd left the trail temporarily. He texted me straight back and told me that he'd met Dave at the Amicalola stairs. He said he was a machine and just took off up the stairs after we met. And Chuck did get off for a few weeks to let the weather calm down a bit. He got to Deep Gap and plans to return to Deep Gap on February the 10th. So we're going to be hearing from Chuck again soon. And coming up over the next few weeks, now that we've virtually completed our full class of 2022, I'm going to be reaching out to them all in the coming week and find out if they have any news to report. I've finally organised my spreadsheet of start dates, phone numbers and so on. So look out for a text from me in the coming days, guys, and be prepared to come on the show and share your news. Whether it's your prep or you've started early or you're about to start or your plans have changed. But Dave, who you all just heard from, wasn't finished. We continued chatting and I kept the recording going as he shared this really important, advice from his own wife. Here's Dave again.
I'm going to tell you a quick story, and it's why I think I'm still on the trail. Okay.
Right. Sure.
So, as a little bit of background, my wife is a potter. All right. So she and I are out, Lawrenceburg, Kentucky, walking on a county road. She's trying to help me get in shape for my hike.
Right.
And she says to me, what do you think will be the toughest thing for you on the trail? And I said, absolutely mental. And she said, why is that? And I said, well, I've been on 4 or 5 day hikes before. And about day 3, I start feeling guilty that, I'm out having fun. You're back at the house.
Sure.
And she said, listen, she said, about 12 years ago, I had a dream and I wanted to get Elements Clay Studio started here. And I wanted to jump out there and buy a building. And she said, I had a dream. And she said, I know what that's like. You've got a dream. It's 5 months out of a lifetime. And I want you to go experience that.
Wow.
And
I love her already.
I'll tell you what, that took everything off of me. And Steve, I'd have been off the trail at this point if she didn't remove that guilt, from me.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, you know what? And if you've listened to the show, and I know you have, if you listen to the show, you'll know I say often it is so much easier when you've got the person back home supporting you and behind you 100%. For those who are out there who get constant nagging from home, it must be a darn nightmare. So you're lucky. You're blessed. I tell you, you're blessed.
Yeah.
As you know, we often talk about the importance of support from home, and those who are lucky enough to have that support should realise how fortunate that they are. Dave's wife summed up the best reason to give that support if your spouse, partner, child or parent has the AT dream. Not all of us get the chance to live our dreams, and for many of us, it is only because of the love and support we've received from home that we ever get a shot at this epic adventure. Thanks so much for reminding us of this, Mrs. Burge. I'll see you next week.